I don't like to get into the political debate. And to be honest with you, I don't really care where someone rests on the political spectrum. I'm more interested in sensible laws and policies and procedures and the support of law enforcement. And I believe in the fundamental values of our democracy and our Constitution. I say that because of what is going on in 2020 and the concerns that are out there right now, particularly in Los Angeles County. We're seeing how politics are immersing themselves into the everyday life of law enforcement officers within the law enforcement community.
Where it has absolutely no place and doesn't
it has absolutely no place, because law enforcement officer and an agency is supposed to be apolitical, number one, and should not have, they have to be able to demonstrate neutrality.
Yeah.
And right now we're seeing an attempt of overthrowing the sheriff by rewriting the Constitution in California by the LA County Board of Supervisors. I'm talking about these things because of how it impacts law enforcement mental health in this country. But in California, Jackie Lacey was the DA that was incumbent and was very, very well respected. She was the first Black female in LA County to become the DA, and she lost to a white male, and that was celebrated and that was touted amongst certain areas of our society. And that gentleman was, and this is all public information, was funded a couple $1 million by George Soros. And so there's a political connection here. And that new DA is one that has fully embraced the BLM movement as an organization. There's a very distinct issue that is correlated to mental health in law enforcement, because law enforcement leadership, in my opinion, and I'm sorry to get so passionate about this, but this is a common theme in law enforcement, when they don't feel like they have the support from either their command staff or their local leadership under which they serve and sacrifice so much to do so, they are dealing with politics. They're acting as the driving force behind whether it's new policies and procedures, laws, case law, use of force. To be a cop now in 2020 is a very, very difficult thing. So they're hindering, in many cases, a law enforcement officer's ability to use and apply reasonable force.
Man, let me tell you, you are striking a huge chord. When I think of trauma and post-traumatic stress and those type of things, you're thinking about traumatic events. You're talking about, horrific traffic accidents. You're talking about, uses of force involving firearms, and just witnessing, the trauma that occurs on the streets everywhere in this country. Going to work and being exposed to that is traumatic in itself by nature. But now, with this shift in the country, we see different types of trauma that are going, officers today are going to work today, having been trained, this is what the law says, this is what case law says, this is how you're supposed to do your job. And then you go out and you do it according to your training. But because some politician gets a bug up their ass, or CNN has posted, a use of force that's getting a bunch of attention, they're being indicted for crimes for doing their job, which to me is just, how fucking traumatic can that be? You go out in an honorable profession, do your job in the best way you know how, which is not a stress-free job, and then you're indicted for your actions. It's insane to me. It's just, that is, a bigger safety concern to me for officers than the bad guys with guns.
There's a guy who was doing his job.
Example.
Yeah, Navy SEAL doing his job. What's he get? He gets indicted. So
in combat.
Now that we have local, state and federal prosecutors who just want to placate the mob. So as a result of that, as if we don't see enough shit as a law enforcement officer, as if you're not exposed to enough shit on the street, between what you see, what you have to deal with, what you have to do. Now you have to be looking over your shoulder at possibly, being indicted, being prosecuted they're, you know, in the line of duty for doing what you should do. So take all the stress that's already there, now add that on top.
Now you got to worry about the sheriff, who has to worry about votes, so he has to kind of lean politically. And what is it to throw an officer under the bus? If you have no honor, that's nothing. Or a police chief who works for a city government, and if that city government has a certain political slant, you know, the chief throws his lambs to the slaughter too.
We're hearing things firsthand from officers, that the trials and the tribulations and what is happening in the law enforcement community in 2020. And it's been my opinion, having heard hundreds of stories about what's going on, that the most important thing in law enforcement in 2020 is effective leadership. Leadership and wellness. Work with Dr. John Violanti, who discussed how organizational betrayal, whether it is real or perceived, but betrayal is single-handedly one of the most critical things that exacerbate the symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Right. It is single-handedly. So the correlation between effective leadership and what's going on in society in 2020 and its correlation to mental health is very real. You know, as a law enforcement officer, you expect that you're going to go out there and you expect to see the worst of society. You expect that you might engage a violent suspect. You might get hurt. There is a lot of loss and tragedy. You throw on organizational betrayal, whether it's real or perceived, even just perceived, it has a direct causation on morale and the way that law enforcement agencies can effectively operate. I think all lives matter. As an organization, I don't support Black Lives Matter as an organization. I think that they are pushing for violence and chaos and disorder. It's incongruent with the moral fabric of our country. And to have any local, state, or federal politician allow them a seat at a table to have any conversation whatsoever while they're advocating for violence against our law enforcement officers, or have been responsible for killing our law enforcement officers, is a disgrace.
No, and you're 100% correct. And you know, you're echoing the sentiment of one of our favorite guests, Sheriff David Clark.